Welcome to another episode of Rinse and Repeat with Ilse Wolf from Wolf Property. I have a distinguished guest who turns out I've known for quite some years if we dial back all to the history, Sarah Weaver from the US. And Sarah, welcome. Whereabouts in the US are you right now?
Thanks so much. Well, I am in California this month. I have some speaking gigs at the end of the month. So I did a great American road trip and finally traveling my own country. And it's funny, like when we were talking about full circle, as I was like driving to the beach in my Jeep, I thought, man, this actually feels a lot like, when I had my van in New Zealand and I could just stop what I was doing and go watch a sunset at the beach or go to the ocean. And so I've been getting a lot of those same feelings that I had when I traveled your beautiful country.
That's so great. Oh gosh. And so, basically this is an episode for May 2024. And I was scrolling all the way back through our Instagram DMs. And at some point I realized, gosh, I need to go find out when we first started messaging. And it was nothing to do with, we're in the same business. It was in fact prior to myself entering the real estate industry professionally back in early 2020, when you, in fact, through your account, I would have seen, hey, you're in New Zealand. And I was scrolling back before and saw these photos that you'd sent from when you were traveling in your van and you were driving to Kaikoura in the South Island. So I'm pretty confident to say that you have probably seen more of New Zealand than most Kiwis.
Probably. I lived there in 2009 for about 6 weeks, and I did the Kiwi experience, which is a hop-on
The bus.
bus. Yes. I know that colloquially people call it the green shag bus. I was just a girl from Kansas. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was 19, just was traveling the world. And I did that backpacker experience. Probably could have done it better. I didn't know it was called that at the time. So definitely did not deserve that name while I was traveling in it. And then fast forward to 2020, March 2020, I chose the great country of New Zealand to hide from the pandemic. And it ended up being probably one of the smartest decisions I ever made. And I ended up living there for 15 months.
I know. Okay, so I knew it was about a year. So 15 months, you were a Kiwi, which when you first landed here, had you heard the phrase Kiwi? I guess you would say New Zealander,
No,
but
no, I had because I had I traveled.
because you'd been.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you were a Kiwi for 15 months,
Yeah,
basically.
I even had a Kiwi boyfriend.
Did you?
We don't need to put that on air, but
Oh, how interesting. Oh, how good. Okay, so you were truly local. Okay, cool. But yeah, I mean, so from where to where have you seen? Did you do Cape Reinga to the Bluff, or what was the purpose? Because I think what's really important here is seeing how much of New Zealand you have seen will give our viewers or listeners a sense of how imbued travel is through your life and how you've very uniquely, from at least from my perspective, I think you've uniquely been able to very efficiently dovetail your love for worldly travel with your absolute passion and your professional roles in real estate. Basically summed up, you are living that dream of passive income, benefits of real estate, and doing what you want when you want 24/7. So I guess what I'd love to know is sort of like, where did you travel from and to in New Zealand? First of
yeah,
all.
that first time in 2009, I circumnavigated both the North and the South Island. So
Oh,
went all the way up to Cape Reinga.
Reinga, yeah.
And yeah, all the way. I didn't go to Milford Sound and Doubtful Sound on that trip because I was on a backpacker budget and that didn't fit in the budget. So then when I visited again in 2020, I bought a van the day I landed. And for those of you wondering, like, how did I, get so lucky to come to New Zealand in March 2020? Well, it was intentional. When President Trump closed the U.S. borders, I was in Malaysia for the weekend doing a visa run from Bali, which a lot of your
Yeah.
your Aussie listeners are like, oh yeah, I've been there, done that. So I was doing a visa run, and I was in Malaysia, and I just thought, man, I think this is going to get really bad. Like if the United States is closing its borders, not that I think we're the greatest country on earth. And I just thought that it was, if this country is doing that, I imagine other countries are going to follow suit. And I was right because 4 days after I got, so that happened on March 13th. And
Mm,
I was on a plane the very next morning. And so I applied for a tourist visa in both Australia and New Zealand. Guys, don't come at me in the comments. I chose New Zealand for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons I knew that I could buy a van, and van life was something I'd always wanted to do. I was going to turn 30, or had just turned 30 that year, like 2 months prior. And I thought, okay, it's kind of now or never. Like, when am I going to do van life? My country's way too big to do van life, like as a solo female and feel safe. And so in New Zealand, it was a no brainer. So when I landed at
wow.
the Auckland airport on March 14th, I opened Facebook Marketplace and I started messaging mostly backpacker couples that were selling their van because they were kind of
Mm,
thinking the opposite. They were like, oh, shoot, we better get home because of what's going on. And so I bought a van off of a Dutch couple and I like drove it to the post office, which is like your guys' equivalent of the DMV, and like signed over the papers and then drove to Hamilton and just drove that van. Because I knew someone there. I knew someone in Hamilton. And
okay.
yeah, and I drove that van all over. I went back up to the most northern part of the North Island. I drove all over. I love Mount Maunganui, so I stayed there for a
Oh,
little bit.
yeah.
During the lockdown, like your guys' lockdown, I was in Lake Taupo. I ended up moving out of the van
Gorgeous.
and into an Airbnb. It was unbelievable. And yeah, I just traveled all over and I traveled really slow because while I am now financially independent in 2024, I was not in 2020. And I had a boss. I had a job. I clocked in and out. And so I worked 9 to 5 in the US, which was real early in New Zealand. But it was, opposite hours, opposite days. It was great. I loved it. Like compared to what other people were doing, like working like laborious jobs, like my, Argentinian friends and my German friends, my job was sweet.
The fact that you had this life experience circumnavigating both of our islands
Mhm.
whilst working full time on a US time zone, that's unreal. And so that was only 4 years ago. Fast forward to today, you're financially independent. But big question for you, first of all, how was driving on the left hand side of the road for you?
Yeah, it was really fun. I had done it a few times before. Actually learned how to drive manual in Ireland. So on the opposite side of the car, opposite side of the road with tons of roundabouts. The streets are so narrow in Ireland. So, and then also I've done a motorcycle trip through Vietnam. So I feel like I'm a pretty experienced driver. Knock on
Wow.
wood, that I stay a good. But yeah, I feel really comfortable driving almost anything. And so, but yeah, parallel parking a van is difficult on either side of the road. But when you're doing it like how you learned, I think that was the moment. Like now, even still today, when I parallel park, like on the first try, I'm like, man, I'm an amazing driver.
I think that's the headline: financially free through property and parallel parking on the left hand side of the road.
But it's so funny, actually. I recently was on a dating app. I am on dating apps, I should say. And a guy in Omaha, Nebraska. So one of the prompts in Hinge, you can like pick what prompt you want to answer, like what question
Okay.
you want to answer. The question that he chose was unusual skill. Okay, like really interesting. You could put so many interesting things in there, and he put parallel parking. I don't know about you guys. I'm not impressed. Parallel parking is not a unique skill. It is I think, a mandatory skill if you have a driver's license.
It's an
But
expectation.
that's just my opinion. I swiped left on that guy. I was not impressed.
Yeah. Gosh, that's great. Okay, so honestly, from the stories that we've already heard, you sound extremely worldly. I mean, sum up how many countries have you lived and traveled and passively invested in property? How many countries have you already toured?
Yeah, I visited 53 countries on all 7 continents. I just went to my 7th continent last month. I actually took real estate investors with me. We'll talk about how I do that. And then I invest in the US. So I own in 4 US states. and I buy most of them while I'm traveling full time. And so I'm analyzing properties. I analyzed properties from my van in New Zealand. I went under contract a few times. I terminated contracts. And then finally, I bought a fourplex in Omaha, Nebraska, all the way from New Zealand.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So, what I'd love to do is sort of wind back to the beginning and then we'll take us on this real estate journey. What was the catalyst or what was that aha moment that helped you realize, look, I need a better way? I mean, you were already doing it so well, somehow living and traveling and working. So, what was the change that you realized I want to live off real estate investments?
Yeah, I think for me it wasn't necessarily that I wanted to live off real estate investments because I'm still not living off my real estate investments. I could if I wanted to. But I'm entrepreneurial. I've had the great experience of working for entrepreneurs. So most all of my jobs, I've been working for small businesses, entrepreneurial, super like entrepreneurial spirited bosses. And I think I always felt like a kindred spirit with them. And I think one of the reasons, like my most recent boss, I think that she really appreciated it because I took so much ownership in her company. Like I felt like it was
Yes.
mine and I cared so deeply. And I am always looking at ways to make more money, create more revenue streams. And so I knew that eventually I wanted to start my own business and I
Hmm.
was scared. I don't have a husband. I'm not dual income. I don't come from money. My parents don't have money. I was living so frugally, so frugally. How I was able to afford even the backpacking trip in 2009 was I had enough academic and financial aid at university. They actually wrote me a check that first year. And then I was maybe a little irresponsible and I used that money to backpack New Zealand. And so it may sound like with all the travel that I've done that, oh, she must come from money or, oh, she owns all this real estate. She must come from money. But the reality is I don't. And when I first started investing in real estate, I was making $47,000. That was my salary. And in the US, that's not very much because your health insurance is coming out of that, your student loans are coming out of that. And so you're really not left with very much. Like living in the United States is really expensive. And
Mm,
and so it for me it was seeing these entrepreneurs have, $40,000 months or $80,000 months and realizing, I really think I can do this, but then being too scared to take the jump. And so when I was in New Zealand and I bought that property, that fourplex, that was my third property. So I
hmm.
owned two before that. But keep in mind, guys, it took me almost 3 years to buy that third property. And
Yeah.
so, sorry, 3.5 years. So I bought that third property, and with the cash flow from just those three properties, it replaced my income completely because I wasn't
Wow.
because I wasn't making very much money. Like we're not talking about $10,000 a month. We're talking about three.
Yeah.
And so it was a little easier to replace your income when you're not making very much. And then that is what finally gave me the courage. Like, okay, I replaced my income with three properties. If I got
Wow.
40, because you don't just get 40 hours a week back when you start working for yourself or stop working for someone else, you really get about 60 hours a week back because how much mind space was my
Yes.
job and my boss and my responsibilities. Like, that's what I was thinking about when I was in the shower. Like, that's what I was thinking about on a walk on a Sunday because I loved my boss and I loved my job. And so you don't just get 40 hours a week back. For me, I got 60 hours a week back. And I threw all of that energy into building my businesses. And now I have three. They're all revenuing well over six figures. And yeah, it's great.
That's incredible. Congratulations. That is hustle and it is your entrepreneurial spirit. You've clearly had some incredible mentors and inspiration. Plus, comment as an employer, dream employee. I mean, the employee everybody wants, to care that passionately about what they do.
Oh,
But
and I
you,
was I was flawed too. I don't want your audience to think I was a perfect employee, but I did. I really, really, really admired my last two bosses. I really admired them,
yeah,
and I feel really lucky to have worked for them.
that's great. So, what was your profession at that point? What was the role? Was it real estate related or not?
It was. I've done a plethora of things. I have a degree in journalism and international studies because I wanted to be an international journalist. I worked for the largest newspaper in Kansas, still not a very large newspaper, but still. And then I worked for Sports Illustrated. I worked for a
Wow.
company in Germany, based in Spain. I worked for a social media like job as a startup, and then I taught English in South Korea. And so my
That's
resume
right.
is a bit laughable. Like I look at it and I'm like, I don't know why anyone ever hired me because I jump around. Clearly, still have commitment issues, and then I became a real estate agent. And real estate agent, I realize, is pretty similar to New Zealand and Australia as far as like the job goes.
Mm,
And I just didn't like it. I didn't like being commission only. I didn't like putting people in my car, driving them to a house, and then they're like, "Oh, we don't like the paint color. We're not going to buy it." And I'm like,
yeah.
"I mean, like I'll paint it with my own bare hands. Just buy the freaking thing." And so it was too frustrating for me being a real estate agent. It just wasn't my passion.
Mm,
Also, I knew I wanted to be remote. And so I
okay.
knew I wanted to be location independent. So that's when I started working for the first company I worked for, which was a recruiting agency. And we recruited administrative staff for real estate agents. So
Hmm.
your like real estate brokerages in New Zealand have a receptionist. Some of the larger agents have an assistant or a marketing coordinator. Those are the types of roles that I placed for. And what was
Okay.
really cool about that job is my boss at the time lived in Florida, moved to Portugal, moved to Spain. And so when I told her that I wanted to, work from Colombia, South America for 3 months, she was like, good for you. And so,
Yeah.
and then her and I ended up having a girls' trip. I visited her in Spain. We went to Morocco for the weekend. And so I really worked for someone that I really enjoyed working for.
Yeah, and that alignment, that culture, actually, you'd already been exposed and had inspiration from these incredible leaders that you admire so much, who have managed to do everything and make it work. And
Yeah.
I think even before you got into real estate, it sounds like this is who you are. You want to be location independent. You want to make everything fit in with the lifestyle that you choose to have and be where you want. And I think because that's actually how you've started out, everything does fit in. It's the same analogy is the same for when you have kids. People think, oh, you can't be social, you can't socialize. But actually, you pull them into your way of life, and that is what they know, and that is their normalcy. So it's the same sort of idea, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I need to flash this book because this is one of the favorite memoirs that I brought home from BP Con. So I guess we've been messaging virtually for 4 years, and then we finally met face to face. I was so excited. 30-day stay, entirely new category that most people will not have even heard of, especially in Australasia. Medium-term rentals. The book is by Sarah Weaver. And we met at Heather's event at BPCon last year, face to face, finally, which was great. So, what I'd love to really dive into here is medium term rentals, MTR. Most people will know long term rentals. Most of the people I work with follow the BRRRR strategy for buy and hold. We all know short term rentals slash Airbnb. It's basically Airbnb in New Zealand, but short term rentals, STR. What is MTR,
Yeah, so
Sarah?
it's really similar to a short-term rental or an Airbnb. It's a furnished rental, but instead of having 2-night or 3-night stays, my guests stay for 30 days or more. Hint the name of the book, 30-day stay. And on average, my guests actually stay for 87 nights.
87 nights.
Yep.
Who are these people? Who are these tenants?
Yeah, a lot of them are travel medical professionals. So in the United States, we have a lot of travel nurses, travel anesthesiologists, travel surgeon assistants, a lot of different roles within the hospital where people can take a 3-month contract at another hospital. And the reason that they do it, just to give you guys some numbers, is maybe a staff nurse, like a regularly employed nurse, might make $36 an hour, maybe.
Okay.
But in that same hospital, in that same role as a travel nurse with a 3-month contract, you can make $118 an hour.
Being the only difference being you're a contractor and available to travel.
that you wrote, you're only signed a 3-month contract. And after that 3-month contract, the hospital may extend or offer for you to extend, which is nice because on my end, when I host those types of nurses, 47% of them renew for 1 to 3 months more,
Wow.
which helps with my occupancy as the landlord or the owner of the rental. And then some of the contracts I'm learning, they also are given a housing stipend. So I just
Right.
recently met a travel nurse he was in Albuquerque, and he had a contract there. Before that, he had a contract in Santa Barbara. Before that, he had a contract in Seattle. He's living in really cool places. And he also had a $2,000 stipend on top of his $39,000 a week salary.
What?
39, sorry,
Fi-
3,900. So he was making 15,000 a month plus 2 grand in
mm-hmm.
just his housing stipend. So that is your perfect tenant for a few reasons. One, they don't really care about cost.
Yes.
Two, they're just there to eat and sleep, and sometimes
Mm.
not even eat. Sometimes my cleaner tells me that it looks like they didn't even use the kitchen, like barely
Yeah.
use the stove because they're tired. They are there to work, especially when they go to mine. Mine are located in Omaha, Nebraska, and Des Moines, Iowa. And so when they're there, they're there to make bank. So like if they
Mm.
can pick up extra shifts, they're doing it. They are
Yeah.
there to like eat and sleep. And so the apartment, the unit is so lightly lived in that they make for
Yeah.
the best tenants.
So very, very low wear and tear, if anywhere at all. Often not using the kitchen. Um, so is this a new type of employment, or is it that people like yourself have cottoned on to the fact that, hey, there's a better way to do this for a higher margin, less wear and tear, ongoing maintenance, so many benefits, as you mentioned. And I'm thinking along with this, there's probably other opportunities for bolt-on revenue or income as well, based on this whole dynamic. But how did this come about?
Yeah, I actually met travel nurses when I was backpacking in 2016.
Yeah,
I actually like I met many. Like I remember being like, "Oh wow, there's a lot of nurses." Cuz what they would do is they would get a 3-month contract, maybe get another 3-month contract, but then they would take 3 months off and they'd go backpacking because they were like, "Sweet, we're
cool.
making great money." And burnout is real, and so they also needed a break. And
Yeah,
so I met so many nurses. Actually, like it's so funny now that I've written the book, I'm, the landlord to these types of nurses. I still, when I'm backpacking or out and about, I will meet a travel nurse and I'm like, oh, funny, I know a lot about you, like, because
yeah,
my ideal tenant. And so
yeah.
I knew about the concept years ago. And it wasn't until I was seriously looking at real estate in about 2019, 2020. I knew I wanted to scale my portfolio. At that point in time, I owned a single family and a duplex.
Hmm.
And one thing that's really unique about mortgages in the US is that we can do 3% down if we're
Yes.
willing to live in the property. And so for your audience, it sounds like, oh, wow. I mean, she says she didn't make money, but she has a single family and a duplex. Well, it's because, guys, my down payment on that first one was $7,000.
Yeah, it's wild. The numbers are so good. So
And I had
for
interest.
conversion purposes, it's probably a 1.6 conversion to NZ dollars right now. That is so little money. It's exactly the reason why I'm about to buy in Baltimore, where the state's selling properties for $1. Which,
Exactly. And then 2 years later, I bought my second property, also lived in it, and was able to put 3% down again. And that down payment was even less because I bought this dinky duplex in Kansas City, Missouri. So my down payment was 5,000 US dollars. And
wow.
and so people ask all the time, like, wow, how did you come up with the capital? I was like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I still want to be sensitive. I mean, for some people, saving 7 grand like is difficult, but for
Hmm.
me, I had really good money habits because I
Yeah.
never had money, and so when
Yeah.
I did start making money, I'm a saver. Even my own mother is like, dear God, like buy new shoes, like go do your hair, like spend some money, Sarah Weaver, and I'm just like, I don't know, I'm a little frugal, a little frugal. I'm working on it. I'm working.
But hey, all the better for it. It's incredible. So, I mean, are there different types of tenant? Is it purely traveling medical staff? Like, does this entire category revolve around medical staff?
Yeah,
Because
it
I
kind
know that it's nationwide and there are specific platforms. I couldn't remember in my mind it was Homely, or there's a platform
yeah, in
where
the
it's
United
it's
States, we have a website called
Furnished
furnishedfinder.com.
Finder,
It's not international.
furnishedfinder.com.
Yeah, it's not international as of now, but that's where I get quite a few of my tenants. But most of my
Mm.
tenants still book through Airbnb. And
Oh,
so,
really? Yeah.
yep, so
Okay.
most of them book through Airbnb. And then there are a lot of different tenants. So it's not just travel medical professionals. For example, I just had Joseph. He moved into one of my units in Omaha, Nebraska because he got a job in Omaha. His wife
Mm-hmm.
wasn't ready to sell their house in New Mexico. They wanted to have one last Christmas there. And so
Yep.
he moved to Omaha by himself for 3 months. So he lived in my unit. Then another woman came because unfortunately her husband was in the hospital and she
Mm.
had been more or less like living at a motel and she was so sick of
Right.
it. So she moved
Yeah.
into my unit while her husband was in the ICU.
Oh, wow.
Other examples of MTR tenants are people that unfortunately can no longer live in their house because of a disaster. So if a pipe freezes, it bursts, creates a flood, then you got black mold. Well, that house isn't livable.
Mm.
And so that individual or family is going to need to live somewhere for 1 to 6 to 9 months while their
Yeah.
house is being renovated.
Mm.
Other examples would be people like me, like I'm a digital nomad. So someone who I'm an MTR tenant. I tend to live in somewhere
Yeah.
furnished for a month because I'm
Yeah.
traveling the world and I'm working full time. So I don't typically like to go visit a new city just for a week because Monday
Hmm.
through Friday I'm more or less working, not as much as I used to, but I'm still working. I'm running
Mm.
companies, and so
Yeah.
I'm an MTR tenant.
That's interesting. And I'm not sure if you keep up with the weather here, but last summer we had, you know, 100-year extreme weather events. We had a couple of them, so it's like, insurance claim periods when literally suburbs of people are need to move out of their houses. We call it red stickered, where the house is no longer safe. And so there's this huge displacement of people needing to find temporary accommodation. Hotels and motels don't cut the mustard when you don't have laundry facilities,
You
probably
have a
don't
dog,
have.
you have to cook for yourself, you have 3 kids,
Exactly.
especially in the US, like when you have, two parents working from home, because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
them work remotely now, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe the kids are even like not in that. It's just, you can't live in a motel. You just can't.
No, 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 that's incredible. And so, I mean, I'd love give us an example numbers wise of the type of property you have bought. So, what's a purchase? What's the purchase price? We'll go US dollars. Purchase price. You are furnishing that property, right? So this is
Right.
like setting up for a short-term rental or Airbnb.
Exactly.
What do those rent? How are you assigning the rent levels? How do you compare, given those additional, conveniences that you're affording people for these various reasons?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about my most recent purchase, or a recent purchase, I should say. I purchased it in March 2022, and it is a up down duplex. So it's a single family home that was converted into a duplex before I purchased it. It
Hmm.
was completely turnkey, meaning completely renovated. Everything was brand new. And the upstairs unit is a 2 bedroom, 1 bath. The downstairs unit is a 2 bedroom, 1 bath. And I purchased it for 183,000 US dollars.
Brand renovated, basically 4 bedroom, yeah, two rentals for 183,000 US.
Yes, this, even guys like Californians, like, this is jaw dropping to people across the country, even in the United States. But yes, that is what duplexes cost in Des Moines, Iowa. And so then I know some of the audience is probably wondering, okay, but do people even want to live in Des Moines? Like, why? Like, if houses are that cheap, like, how crappy of a place is this? No, it's just a smaller place, and so there's nothing wrong with it. It's beautiful. The suburbs of the city are actually like, great university, great public schools. So people do surprisingly want to live there. And so much so that I've been almost fully occupied. So my downstairs tenant is a
Hmm.
long-term tenant, unfurnished. They pay $850.
Hmm.
And the upstairs tenant is a MTR tenant, and they pay $1,900 a month.
Per month, right?
Correct.
Wow, 1,900. So literally more than twice the long-term rent for the same property. This is a great example. You have the top down, like this compared to this, long-term
Yep.
versus
And then my
MTR.
monthly payment, which includes like my principal and interest, aka the mortgage, plus interest, plus insurance, plus taxes.
Mm-hmm,
We call it PITI in the US, and
mm-hmm.
it's $884 a month.
So you're cash flowing. So basically, the long-term tenant covers your costs,
Hmm.
and the 1900 is your profit.
Yep.
So your MTR is your profit machine.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I set aside money for utilities, lawn care. I set other money aside for vacancy, property management, even though I do self manage this property. And, any maintenance, repairs, capital expenditures, things that will happen eventually.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it still cash flows really, really well.
That's incredible. So, I mean, you have a scaled portfolio. You have a large portfolio, predominantly in MTR. So, a few long-term rentals, but mostly medium. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I'm about 50-50. So I have 19
Okay.
units, 10 of them are MTR, and 9 of them are long term.
Wow. So last month's guest was Mark Simpson, who you'll know from
Yeah.
Boostly, and he presented at BPCon. Great guy. He's obviously on this mission to put the profit share back in the hands of the landlord, right? So knowing the Airbnb's fees are 14%, and they're crawling, they're clawing up the ladder with their fees for landlords. You must have a pretty high motivation to have your bookings as direct. Would that be accurate? Like, do you have a direct booking platform?
Well, I don't
He's
want to make
probably tapping on your door going, Rob Abasallo's already done this with Next Sleeps.
I don't want Mark to be mad, but no, I like Airbnb. I think I'm one of the like rare hosts that I love it when I get an Airbnb booking. It's easy. I don't have to do anything. They handle the payment. Sure, air cover isn't the greatest insurance, meaning that if something breaks, somebody does do something in the property, dealing with air cover is less than ideal. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I like it.
Okay, that's good.
It's less admin time, it's less money. When
Mm-hmm.
when I find a tenant through Furnish Finder, for example, which I also love them as a lead resource,
Mm-hmm.
then I have to write up a lease. I have to set them up their payment. Does this take a lot of time? No, but it takes about 45 minutes, and that's once I've already found a tenant. But to actually find a tenant through a website like Furnish Finder, I'm having to message them, text them back. They don't get back to me. Then they have stupid questions. I mean, questions. And then I'm just a lot of back and forth. And so
Yeah,
what I love is just today, I had an instant book for 27 nights through Airbnb.
great. Great.
And so I don't want to upset Mark because he's a great guy, and Boostly is an incredible resource for people looking for a direct booking site.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm one of the rare hosts. I like the easy button. I like lazy,
Yeah.
and
Well,
so
it also is a.
like maybe I'll switch. But the way Airbnb works is most of the fee is paid by the guest. And so the fee that I'm being charged as a host, it's not 14%. It's very nominal.
Okay, okay, and that's fair, right? And I think because you have that scale portfolio, you have the luxury or the convenience, if I could call it that, for deciding, right, and to then afford yourself that convenience.
Well,
And I would say that the.
I have staff. And so, like, my staff so I have two virtual assistants in the Philippines, and they're the ones writing up the lease, communicating. And so I can see, like, dollar per hour how much this is costing me,
Mm.
more than $1 per hour, in case that's not clear. And so it's for me, you're going to spend the money one way or the other.
Yeah, and I think for more the hobby hosts, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
like I think it's something like
Or the host
75.
or the
Oh,
host that, I mean, if you're getting, $9,000 a month for your property, which some of my students in my program are. I just had a student sign a $13,000 a month lease.
what?
Yeah. And so when we're talking that, okay, sure, that does make sense to be a direct booking.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And also on the opposite end of the scale, if you're the hobby host, we call them mum and dad investors here. You have one rental property or one listing on Airbnb. So every dollar counts, right? Because to try and, if you have one property and you're on Airbnb, it's that you're trying to claim a bit more margin from higher short-term rents as opposed to long-term rents. Right now, because of the cost of property here, which you may have realize, when you
Oh
were
yeah, I
local. Oh
suppose.
yeah. Oh yeah.
So
So
fun.
yeah, the down payment is takes years to save for. The government, basically there's a whole program behind that to help first home or first time buyers. The interest rates, we've just come down into the high 6.8, 6.9% interest rates per annum, but every property is negatively geared unless you I call it cash flow hacking, which I have a trademark process, supercharging a BRRRR process to get, manipulate the house to the highest number of bedrooms, etc. So if you're not doing that, you're otherwise topping up the mortgage by US dollars around 300 per week,
Yep.
US per week. That's the top up on top of, the net incoming rent. But yeah, so I mean, a lot of mum and dad investors have moved to Airbnb to try and at least get coverage because costs are so high. They're the ones who care about dollar for dollar, right? But yeah, I think once you scale the portfolio, each of the properties plays a role, but they supplement each other, right? So it's not as essential to count every single dollar. But hey, so talk me through how you layer. What are the terms of the lease, or what are those different revenue streams? Because I know in your book you talk about there could be a refundable pet deposit. There's also a non-refundable pet circumstance, cleaning. What's the frequency for your 87-day stays? Are there options that you negotiate with tenants, or hey, here's my template. If you're staying more than X number of days, it rolls into this. How does it work?
Yeah, so every guest, regardless of how they book, they pay a cleaning fee. That cleaning fee, I used to inflate it, and then I would make, I don't know, $20 maybe was the gap. But frankly, my cleaners increased her pricing. And so I don't make anything from the cleaning fee. So that just goes straight into the hands of the cleaner. And then I do pay I charge a pet fee, as
Mm-hmm.
well as a pet deposit, if they're booking off of Airbnb. So inside of Airbnb, the pet fee is quite small, and then there's no pet deposit. There's also no security deposit if they book through Airbnb, and so for some people that is a bonus for booking
Mm-hmm.
through there. And then I don't do any of these things, but I have clients who they are adding in cleaning services, laundry services, and adding anywhere between 10 and 20% margin on top of it. So there are other ways to make money. I
Mm-hmm.
personally just haven't gone down that road.
Wow, that's incredible. So with the laundry, what would be typical? Is this if the property does not have a laundry inbuilt to the property, or is it convenience, dry cleaning laundry like a hotel?
Yeah, exactly. Like a hotel, there's a lot of really great services in the US where you can just put your laundry on the front step and it gets picked up. And then 2 days later, you get a very nice folded laundry. I mean, it's very common in Southeast Asia. I don't think I ever did my own laundry. I would just drop it off somewhere. But in
Mm,
the US, this is obviously a upscale service,
yeah,
with a nice price tag.
yeah, and for medical professionals, completely in line with that audience.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So with your multiple businesses, constant travel, why are you a hands-on landlord? Because I wanted to ask that in the very beginning, because you know these tenants intimately, you know their name, you know what they're doing, you know their circumstances, such a direct relationship. So is this a personal preference? You have such a level of care, obviously, with everything you do. Is that why?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I do self-manage my properties, mostly because I realized that with a in-house property manager, like a virtual assistant, I'm able to retain control, and then I'm not giving 20%, which is what a furnished property manager charges. And that just kills your cash flow. So at the beginning, it was necessity. Like at the beginning, if I, paid someone 20 to 30% of my fee, I mean, that was a huge part of my cash flow. And so
Mm,
it really started out as necessity. And then as I manage my own properties, I realized that it really doesn't take that much time. So
okay.
what happens now? Let me give an example. So one of my units, it's a long-term property, okay, long-term tenant. And it has a yearly, or sorry, every 2 years, I need to get what's called a rental permit. So the city actually comes out, views the property, walks through, and they nitpick at so many different things. This outlet isn't correct, or this something blah 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 isn't up to code. So we got a very nice long list of things that needed to be repaired.
Sounds the
My
same as here.
my VA got the email. She looked it over and she already had contacted me before I even got the email and said, "Hey, we got this list. I'm going to go ahead and message Travis, our handyman. Are you okay with that?" I'm like, "Yes, I am more than okay with that." Then she coordinated with Travis and she coordinated with my tenant. And then she even took care of the invoice, which obviously I approved and paid it with the company credit card and did all of this. And I wasn't involved whatsoever.
Wow.
And so,
Brilliant.
and so I'm paying, significantly less to do it this way rather than pay a property manager. And frankly, a property manager, they're going to email you with all the same problems. Like, do you approve this? Do you approve this? And you're like, why are you even emailing me? I could do this myself.
Mhm. Right. And then you would have been coordinating, I would assume quite a few different professionals, right? So most of it probably was the handyman. But if someone didn't have the convenience of a dedicated handyman, you probably are, I call them power teams. Once you have a strong ongoing relationship and they know there's a constant stream of work, you are priority client, right? But for most investors, that laundry list of items would have been 6 or 7 different suppliers and manually having conversations and repeating yourself and then following up manually on payments and things as well, chasing up different people to site and coordinating the site access. So that's a huge convenience. Yeah. At the same time, you know precisely what's gone on because of the great communication with your VA. But you haven't had to use your time for that lower level job.
Yeah, and I think as far as your tenants go, I think that I am fully occupied most of the time and I have that great retention rate where people want to stay with me
Mm,
is because I do treat them like people because they are guys, they are people. Like
yeah.
when I rented from a woman in Queenstown for a month, she treated me like a person because I am a person. And so I think that a lot of landlords like, oh, they're like, oh, my tenant this and my tenant that. It's like, I'm sorry, this is the greatest like hourly rate I've ever made is owning rental property. And so if
Mhm.
they're going to message me and ask about the Keurig and they can't figure out how to use the coffee maker, I'm going to answer with patience and kindness because my hourly rate is fantastic. Plus, plus
Awesome.
I'm messaging, I was in Italy this summer. I was in Africa before that. I was in London before that. And so if all I have to do is handle a few issues here and there with my properties or, treat my tenants well while I'm getting to travel the world, I
Mhm.
think this is the greatest job ever.
Mm. It really is a mindset shift, isn't it? Because helping someone fix a coffee machine, it's one thing if it's an inconvenience and it's a distraction or what have you, but literally, you're just pointing out the fact that you're on an incredible hourly rate because of being in real estate. You're being
Yeah.
paid, I don't know, the same as a medical professional to assist. This is literally the job. This is
Yeah.
literally the job. Yeah.
And like I use that coffee example because that never happens because I have things in my house manual how
Yeah.
to explain how to use everything. Like I have really dummy proofed most of my units because anytime we get a question, it tells me I'm not doing my job that they don't know how to use the TV remote or I'm not doing my job that they can't figure out how to get into the unit. I need
Yeah.
to explain everything in a way that no one's wondering.
That's such an amazing way to put it. Yeah, for sure. Now, so you have these 19 units that you're running mostly personally. What do you call it? Self managing,
Hmm.
but you have 2 other businesses you mentioned. So I know that you were coaching real estate agents a while ago. Is that one of the 3 that you still have? Is that
Yes. Yeah.
yeah?
So I coach anyone looking to invest in real estate. So I have a 6-month coaching program where I take people through the entire buying process and beyond. Because what's really interesting about real estate, and I know that you've experienced this, we have like a whole new set of questions when something new happens. So when you're first buying, well, there's questions about how to finance it. Where should I buy? What strategy should I do? Okay, then you go under contract. Well, now you have a bunch of questions like, what do I
Yeah.
do now? Then you get your first tenant and you're like, oh my gosh, now I have all these other questions. And so I'm really there to handhold my students and answer questions throughout the whole process. And so one of the things that's really important to me is that I'm taking everything that I've learned over the last 7 years as a property owner and 9 years in the real estate industry. and I'm putting it all into really digestible, understand step-by-step guides. Because guys, I might not be like the smartest person in the room, but I am incredibly brave to have chosen to invest in real estate. And I believe anyone can do this. And
Mm.
so I think with the right guidance and the right explanations, this is possible for anyone.
That's incredible. So, what does that program look like? Because it's a regular Zoom call. Would that be accurate? So it's group led, not a one-on-one program. But hey, come into the our arms for 6 months, and depending on where you're at along those steps or those different milestones that you mentioned, is it basically it's a check-in and
Yeah,
to ask your
absolutely.
questions? Is that
So
right?
every Tuesday we meet via Zoom, and usually the first Tuesday of the month I'm teaching a new lesson. And then when someone joins, they actually get access to all of the previous lessons. And so
Hmm.
it can be self-paced as someone needs. But for example, I just had someone join last week. And so right away I said, okay, Paul, I know that you mentioned that you don't know how to analyze deals yet. So here's the first video I want you to watch. Once you're done, message me and let me know. And then I'll either
Cool.
send you another one or I'll start sending you properties so you can practice analyzing. So today I sent him 3 properties to like practice analyze, and he's really eager. He's like, "Okay, I'm ready. Like now
Yeah.
where should I invest?" So now I sent him the lesson on where to invest. And so I think the difference between like large scale coaching programs and mine is that I really know their name. I really
Hmm.
know what their struggle is. I'm able now that they've been in the program. Some people choose to stay in the program. And so now I have like people that have been with me for a year and a half. And so now I can even like poke fun and there's some banter like,
Yeah.
okay, you still haven't done that thing that you said you're going
Yeah.
to do. Um, and I
I
come out,
saw in your story there was a page, there was a really great little chart with like a Tetris grid, and then I will do this before 5 o'clock, and then said Tetris block still out of place. Hands up if you need some help with accountability. So I feel like this is top of mind for you.
yeah, well, accountability, that's how
That's a
I
big
got
part of
where
it.
I am. It's how I got where I am. I hung out with people that were 2 steps ahead of me. Not 10 steps, not 100 steps. People in that position, they don't have time for me. So I hung out with people that were 2 steps ahead. And so what I think is really important is that you have someone there really asking you like, hey, what's actually keeping you from doing that thing you keep saying you're going to do? And so that's what my mentorship program gives my students. And we go
Very cool.
way beyond real estate. I mean, we have like a health and fitness channel within the forum. We're talking about, we're reading books on personal development. We're talking about mindset. I think
I
that when
love
people
it.
join my program, they're like, oh, wow, this is like full on with everything about being a person, not just a real estate
Real
investor.
estate. I love this so much. Okay, that's great. So that's your 6 month program, but then the other business is the Intrepid Journeys, right? So talk me through this. I'm definitely coming next year because you're about to hit Mount Kilimanjaro, and I heard about your first trip after the fact. So give us an example. Tell me some of the places, these retreats. What's the name of the business, first of all?
Yeah, it's called Invested Adventures. And I take real estate investors on epic adventures around the world because I believe a bucket list trip like Kilimanjaro or Antarctica, I think they should be a tax write off. And so, what's really nice is that these are with other real estate investors. And so, guess what, guys? This is a business expense.
Love this. So what do you do? What do you do on this Invested Intrepid journey?
Yeah, so it really depends on which one you choose. My like signature investor retreat is usually a little more calm, less hiking, usually a little bit more wine. And during these investor retreats, we're actually diving into you, your challenges, a question that you might have, so that you walk away with a clear strategy and plan for not only your investing but your year. I believe that the reason that people don't have the life that they want or the portfolio that they want is something that's going on up here. I think it's mostly limiting beliefs. It's mostly mindset. Yet people don't want to pay for mindset coaching. So I really focus a lot on how can we get you to where you want to go. So those investor retreats usually spend 3 days together in an epic location, eating great food, drinking great wine, and really talking through some of the solutions that you need for your business and your portfolio.
Hmm.
Then, by popular demand, I have adventure trips. So I have Antarctica, where we just went to Antarctica. I had Kilimanjaro where, yeah, sure, when you did have downtime in the evening, yeah, you're going to talk about real estate because we can't help ourselves. We love talking about real estate. But also, we were just trying to survive that hike. And so some of our trips are just epic adventures like African safari, or, you know, we drank wine in the south of Italy. We're doing really, really fun things, but in community together.
Mm. And are you're creating the itinerary, I presume? How do you, and then are you managing? So, I mean, you have clients internationally, right? So, say I want to join in Italy and you have people from the US joining. Who's doing that piece? Is it, hey, you get yourself here, there's the start time, here's 3 days, here's the agenda. Have I got that right?
Yeah, exactly. So my trips, the moment you land at the airport, we pick you up and take care of everything. So you need to get yourself there. But what's really important to me, and like what I loved about the Italy trip, for example, is it was a lot of very, very successful entrepreneurs and real estate investors. And the thing that they kept saying is, oh my gosh, I love that I don't have to make any decisions. Like,
Yeah.
even when we went to the restaurants, I ordered all the food. They literally didn't have to choose anything except for, should I drink white or red wine tonight?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Oh my goodness. How many trips with investors per year? So we have the hardcore real estate trips and then the adventure trips. I mean, first of all, how many days are you in one country ever? Or how often are you flying? And then how often do you have these trips? Because you're coordinating your own travel with your mentees, with your MTR management. How frequent are these trips?
Yeah, last year, 2023, I did 10 trips in 5 countries.
I mean, that's one every 6 weeks.
It was a lot. And this year, I am doing less invested ventures trips because I'm speaking on stage a lot more. I am speaking at about 16 conferences this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which is your next one?
I am headed to the MTR Summit, actually. So that is put on by Jesse Vasquez in
Yeah.
San Diego. And so I'm speaking at that. Then I'm attending a conference. Then I'm speaking at a yoga retreat in Ojai, California. And so a lot of conferences. And then next year, 2025, I'm about to announce, I'm probably going to do, well, I know that I'm going to announce 6 trips, and we may add on a few more, but it's going to be 2025 is going to be a really exciting year.
We've barely started 2024 and you already planned with all of these things that you do, you already plan for 2025. I love this so much.
Americans are asking for things in 2026. Like, they're planners.
Wow. So, I mean, hey, giving you a sense, listeners, of how significant the MTR trend is. It is the fastest growing category within real estate.
Absolutely.
There's an entire summit around this. I'm coming over to Denver for the STR summit, which is the Robinsons. I don't suppose. Yeah, are you attending? The Robinsons are hosting.
I will not be there.
No. Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
be in there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, what a shame.
I know. Sorry.
So good. But the great thing is, right, like, I'm heading over there. I'm really excited because I'm catching up with
Good.
Katie. You know, Katie develops, right? So she's in Texas.
Yeah.
So actually bringing the family over this time. We'll
Oh,
go stay at
amazing.
Katie's.
Oh, Denver's so beautiful. One thing I hate is when people come to the US and they only go to LA, Vegas, New York, San Francisco. Denver is so, well, it's a bit of a concrete city, but if you can get out of the city and like plan something to go into the
Mhm.
mountains, it's so
Yeah.
nice. And
Oh,
it's
wow.
it's really similar obviously to something like Queenstown, but it also just, it's so different. There's really
Yeah.
nothing like a Colorado mountain town.
Oh, great. I'm really excited. At the summit, Tyler and Zosha, Madden are presenting. And they're locals. So I'm really excited to see their luxury flips as well, which hopefully will be
Excellent.
in
Yes,
practice. Yeah.
I love it. You're talking about all my friends. These are all my friends.
Yeah. I love it. Oh my goodness. Very excited. You've got me excited about the travel. But hey, I know you need to probably jump on a plane, go somewhere else. But if for the listeners here, what's the most tangible tip you could give them to walk away with? If they were considering, hey, how could I maybe convert my long-term rental or a short-term rental into an MTR? What are the signs they're looking for? What do you
Yeah,
think?
I think as a real estate investor, you should always be thinking like, what problems can I solve? So let's use Queenstown as an example, just because I know it well, and a lot of your listeners will understand what Queenstown is. So
Mhm.
you have people moving there for jobs, not just like backpacker jobs, but people moving there for jobs that have great salaries. And sometimes they're moving there and they're not ready to buy a house, or they can't afford to buy a house, or it's really hard to find somewhere to rent. And so, can you be the solution to people like that? Can you rent out a portion of your home, like the woman that I lived with when I lived there? Can you rent out a portion of your home and at least subsidize some of your mortgage? I think that when people look to invest in real estate, they're looking for this like step by step guide. But instead, I'd rather teach people to think creatively. And
Mhm.
so, like using the BRRRR strategy and figuring out, okay, are there other ways that I can purchase property and finance it? I think that it really is my biggest advice is get creative.
Love it. Thank you so much. And there, and be stemming from MTR and STR, there are all these other ideas with that same creative line of thinking, like luxury boutique hotels. I know there's an entire summit around that now. So
I will be
I think the
speaking at the
category.
boutique. I will be speaking there in the
Whereabouts is that?
it is in the Smoky Mountains, so in Tennessee.
Oh, is that with Avery and Carl?
No, it's with Blake Daly is his name. He actually has a boutique hotel mastermind.
Oh, okay. I feel like that's an area of interest for myself. And these categories, you have scale in the US, so there are hundreds of thousands of opportunities and properties to adapt. And in our tiny little country, those subsegments are so little. But it's about thinking about these ideas, how you can adapt and diversify your own portfolio, listeners. If you have 4 or 5 properties, or if that's the dream, and long term, new build cash flow is extremely low. Long term cash flow is still a challenge. But if you can creatively think like Sarah and adopt her way of thinking to diversify even within your portfolio, how to have one MTR, then you're hedging different cash flows and trying something that might actually give you better margin than you've ever believed you would ever have before. So
Yeah, and I think that's something I would add is like no one's coming to save you. Like no one is going to care about your bank account or your portfolio or your investing or your results more than you. And so I think that that's something that I did a really good job of in my 20s is I was like, "Oh, I'm going to educate myself on money. How do I figure out this money piece?" And for me, investing in the stock market and doing index funds, that seemed really boring and like I don't really have a lot of control. And
yeah.
so that's what led me down the real estate path. But for people listening, maybe index funds or investing in the stock market in any country, maybe that does make sense. But I think the biggest piece of advice I can give people is to just take action and really take control of your future because nobody's coming to take care of it for you.
Correct. Couldn't agree more. Hey, thank you so much, Sarah. Hey, guys, you must look up. Here we go. Medium term rentals, 30-day stay. Please check it out. Is there a digital version on Kindle, Amazon,
There is, yep, Audible, the whole thing.
whole
And then
shebang?
anyone wants to reach out, I'm at Sarah D. Weaver on Instagram or sarahdweaver.com. I really love hearing from people, especially your part of the world. I have just obviously a really special place in my heart for New Zealand. It welcomed me with both arms and at a time when the world
Oh.
was, in chaos. And so I think so highly of both New Zealand and all you Kiwis.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm glad you have such great memories of being here. Hopefully, catch you over on the US soil again very soon. But hopefully, everyone can keep up with you. I'll put some extra notes as to where they can sort of chase you down and see what other adventures you've been up to. But hey, have a really great next expedition. I have a couple of things to look into you for here. So let me jump on with that, and I'll come back to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Ilsa.
Thanks for listening. Perfect.